partnership with between government, civil society, and the private sector, working on the supply-demand water gap that we have in the country, effectively working on the water and sanitation master plan. It is a co-chaired arrangement between the department, the DG, and the private sector, currently AB InBev, SAB. And we have realized the need for the Water Partners Network to play a strong leadership role in the current context of what's happening in the water sector. A little bit more background on the Water Partners Network. It has three core functions. The first relates to leadership and elevating the importance of water and action in water to an executive level and taking decisions, operating effectively like the crisis committees in the other sectors. But importantly, as part of that leadership function, we need to be communicating with the sector at large, to the water sector as well as to water users. And this fits in within that leadership bucket where we have the opportunity to learn from key players in the water sector about what the current situation is, what the challenges are, what the solutions are, and what we can all do, both in our homes, but also in our careers to support improving the situation. The second part relates to our partnerships. So we work a lot on creating partnerships around specific issues. And two of our key drivers at this point in time relate to non-revenue water, so water that leaks in municipalities, and having actions in that space. And the second is Gauteng water security. So this aligns very well with topical issues that we are working on. And then finally, we do projects together with particular public sector partners and private sector partners to provide action and to reduce water demand. So we have current projects in Polokwane and Nelson Mandela Bay, and we also have MOUs with Rand Water and Joburg Water, which have been driven into particular non-revenue water projects to reduce demand. Just to set up the discussion for today, I don't think it needs much introduction in terms of the situation that we have in Gauteng. We are all aware that we are in a tricky situation in terms of the water supply, supplying Gauteng, the economic heartland, its businesses, as well as its over 13 million residents. It's been a long time coming. We can discuss some of what the causes of that, but ultimately we have all realized that there's a need to take action to stop these prolonged water outages that are starting to become a factor within the Joburg and Gauteng landscape. So today really is about hearing from the department, from Rand Water, from major water user around their understanding of the issues, where we are, what the challenges are, what the solutions are, and to try to get guidance around what the steps forward will be, and what we can all do in that context. So again, just to go back to the intent is really information sharing at this level. So more people are aware of what the facts on the ground are. And we will build on this in subsequent sessions to dig into more specific areas. So for example, we may do one with the municipalities and the distribution side, and we may do one, on specific topics like non-revenue water, water conservation, water demand, financing, etc. So that's really the introduction. We're going to run it as a panel session, so fairly informal. And if I may, just to introduce Dr. Sean Phillips, I think very well known by all of you, the Director General of the department. Sean, if we can kick off with you. And I know that you have been sharing this story fairly frequently at different fora, and I think hopefully this is helpful for you to talk to another set of stakeholders. But it'd be great just for you to set it up, please, in terms of the department's understanding of the situation in Gauteng and what you see as the root causes.
Thank you very much, Peter. Good morning to everybody online. The key underlying problem in Gauteng is that there isn't sufficient water in the integrated Vaal River system, which is a system consisting of about 20 different dams, which provides water to Gauteng and to neighboring provinces. The main reason why there isn't enough water in the integrated Vaal River system is not because of a drought. It's because there's been increasing demand, particularly in the Gauteng municipalities, due to rapid population growth in Gauteng, and increased leaks in municipal distribution systems have also contributed to that increased demand. As the national department responsible for water resource planning, we did anticipate that there would be this increase in demand for water in Gauteng, and we planned the second phase of the Lesotho Highlands project. That project was originally planned to start a lot earlier than it actually started, and to come on stream by 2019, and to provide a huge amount of additional water into the integrated Vaal River system. Unfortunately, partly due to challenges in my department, many changes in leadership at both ministerial and accounting officer level over about a 10-year period, the start of the Lesotho Highlands Phase 2 project was delayed by 9 or 10 years. It finally got going in 2022, and there's full-scale construction now in Lesotho. It's a massive project. We're trying to accelerate it as fast as possible, but realistically, it's not going to be finished before 2028 and start providing that additional water into the integrated Vaal River system. As the national department, we put an abstraction limit on any bodies, including agricultural users and Rand Water, which abstract water from the integrated Vaal River system. And we do that using quite sophisticated hydrological models in order to ensure that the system remains sustainable, and to ensure that even in the event of a severe drought, the system will still have enough water to ensure that there's at least still a minimum amount of water to provide drinking potable water to residents that are served by the integrated Vaal River system. Rand Water is already exceeding its abstraction limit slightly on the integrated Vaal River system. So Rand Water is abstracting the maximum amount of water that it can abstract. And it would be irresponsible for us to allow them to abstract any more water, because if there were to be a severe drought, which can happen quite quickly, it could mean that we could enter into a day zero situation in Gauteng. The abstraction limit prevents that from happening. The abstraction limit ensures that that situation doesn't arise. So Rand Water is abstracting the maximum amount of water that it can abstract. It is treating that water. It is fairly efficient in doing that. It has much lower water losses than the municipalities. Its losses are in the region of 3 to 4%. And as you know, Rand Water then provides that water to the municipalities. Rand Water is planning a large-scale construction program to develop additional treatment capacity so that it will be able to treat more water once there is more water in the integrated Vaal River system, and once we can raise the abstraction limit, once Lesotho Highlands Phase 2 starts providing more water into the integrated Vaal River system. At the moment, though, we're now in a situation where the demand for treated water in Gauteng is already occasionally exceeding the supply, particularly during peaks of demand, such as when there's heat waves in Gauteng. That very tight supply-demand situation results in the problems that we're experiencing, where it can take weeks for water supply to be restored following a disruption. What happens is that when there's a disruption, such as due to an electrical or mechanical breakdown, or as was happening in the last couple of years, severe long periods of load shedding, what happens then is that the water levels in the reservoirs of the municipalities become depleted, When the mechanical or electrical repairs completed, or when the load shedding comes to a halt, the very high demand comes back, and because of the limited supply from Rand Water, it takes a very long time for the reservoirs to refill. The water is drawn out of the reservoirs just as quickly as it can be put in. And that is the key reason why sometimes people in some areas of Gauteng have been waiting for weeks to have their water supply restored following a disruption. If we didn't have this very tight supply-demand situation, it would be much easier for the municipalities to fill their reservoirs quickly, and we wouldn't have these long periods of time where people aren't having any water following disruptions, which disruptions will always occur in municipal systems. There will always be mechanical and electrical breakdowns, but it's because of the very tight supply and demand situation that these breakdowns are having such bad effects in terms of the duration in which people have to do without water. There are some other contributing factors. As we know, the municipalities over a long period of time have neglected the maintenance of their infrastructure, and the relatively high level of breakdowns is due to that lack of maintenance. They've also neglected an investment in their infrastructure as their demand has been growing. On a more positive note, many of the municipalities have, since this situation developed over the last couple of years, have substantially increased their budgets for investment in their water and sanitation, water infrastructure in particular. So, for example, Joburg has quite a substantial capital works program which is currently implementing, which involves doing things like building additional reservoir capacity and additional pumping stations, so to make their system more resilient in this very tight supply and demand situation. So there's the key things that need to be done to minimize the risk of water supply disruptions over the next few years is, firstly, we need to make sure that Lesotho Highlands Phase 2 project is implemented expeditiously and is completed as soon as possible. The second thing that we need to do is work with municipalities to get them to reduce the leaks in their distribution systems. The third thing that we need to do is to encourage the municipalities to do the kind of work that the city of Johannesburg is doing to improve the performance of their systems and to invest in their infrastructure to make their systems more resilient. The next thing that we need to do is generally try and reduce demand for water in Gauteng. Even if the municipalities are able to reduce leaks, to improve the performance of their systems, to implement better measures such as pressure management in order to reduce their water losses, that on its own won't be enough to minimize the risk of water supply disruptions. We also need to reduce demand as measured by the average consumption per capita of the residents in Gauteng. That average consumption per capita in Gauteng is high compared to international standards. It's around 250 liters per capita per day, whereas the international average is around 170 liters per capita per day. Those figures include leaks, but even if you take leaks out of the equation, the average consumption per capita per day in Gauteng is still substantially higher than the international average, which is an anomaly, given that South Africa is a water-scarce country, and Gauteng in particular is a water-scarce province. So we need to do all of these things if we're going to be able to minimize the risk of water supply disruptions in Gauteng. If we don't do all of them, if we only do 2 out of the 4 or 5 things, then we're still going to have a high risk of disruptions. And what's very important is for us to get the message across to all the residents of Gauteng that all of these things that need to be done. We need to try and build trust and address the trust deficit, and move away from the current situation where, particularly in the media, it tends to be a blame game, and that whenever the water supply disruptions occur, there's a search for who's to blame. Is it Joburg Water to blame? Is it Rand Water to blame? When our communicators, the city's communicators, Rand Water's communicators, and ourselves as DWS, when we try and put this message across that the residents also need to play a part and use water sparingly, then the blame game goes as far as indicating that now government is saying the residents themselves are to blame. So we need to try and move away from this situation where it's just about finding someone to blame. And we need to all accept responsibility and accept that everybody has a role to play to minimize the risk of water supply disruptions, including the national government, the municipalities, and the residents themselves. So we're starting a process of facilitated by the World Bank, in which the SWPN is also assisting and participating, of working with the private sector and civil society to see if we can reach consensus on the problems and their causes and what needs to be done about them, and then to see if we can have a jointly implemented large-scale awareness campaign, drawing on the lessons from Cape Town, which was able to sustainably reduce their average consumption per capita per day when they were trying to avoid day zero. That is the element which is currently missing in Gauteng. The municipalities are trying to reduce their leaks. They could do more. They're investing in their infrastructure. We are trying to accelerate Lesotho Highlands Phase 2, but the part that's missing currently is the awareness campaign, similar to that which is in Cape Town, to bring down the average consumption per day. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Phillips. You set the scene very nicely, and there's a lot of key takeaways from what you said as the backup. Perhaps just one clarification question before we continue. Obviously, there's a lot of importance on Phase 2 of Lesotho Highlands. Just to confirm, so we would see construction completion in 2028. Does that mean it's first water delivery 2028, or is it just to understand that fully?
According to the current schedule, it's first water delivery in 2028.
Perfect. And what that means, what you've quite clearly explained, is that we have a situation until then where we need to very carefully manage the resource that we have. I'll come back with some other clarification questions just now, but perhaps just one thing that might be worth dealing with, because I know it's often discussed in the press, is the issue of the tunnel shutdown. Maybe you might want to just mention a little bit about that. This is a planned shutdown and its potential risk to Gauteng residents. Sorry, you went on mute.
Sorry, Peter.
Did you want to comment on the tunnel maintenance shutdown plan for this year as well? I think just to have clarity on that.
Okay, the tunnel maintenance is planned maintenance. It's something which should be done. As you know, we have problems in South Africa with a lack of maintenance and deteriorating infrastructure due to a lack of maintenance. So the fact that we are doing planned maintenance on the tunnel, which is part of the Lesotho Highlands infrastructure, should be looked on positively, that we're not neglecting the maintenance. The planned maintenance on the tunnel won't have any impact on the water supply in Gauteng. Rand Water will still be currently abstracting during the maintenance period. So it's not going to be a contributing factor to water supply disruptions in Gauteng. We've also, the water supply which might be somewhat affected is water supply to irrigators in some of the small towns in the Free State. And we're engaging with those communities and contingency plans have been put in place, including making sure that other dams which supply those areas are full of water before the maintenance starts.
Thank you. Thank you very much, DJ. I think it's important just to have that clarity. I'm going to move on to Rand Water at this point. Salome, you're very welcome. Thank you for joining us. The DG set up very nicely from a bulk water resource point of view, and I guess I started to tap into a little bit about Rand Water's specific context. Perhaps you'd like to choose how you want to build on what the DG has already shared, maybe just endorse some of what he has said already, but just from your context, it'll be good to get your understanding of the water demand situation and the challenges that you may be facing.
Thank you, Peter, and good morning to everyone. Yes, the DG has indicated that the main challenge is water scarcity in South Africa. So this then means that the Department of Water and Sanitation, various water users, which Rand Water is one of the water users, and Rand Water's allocation to date, it's 1,600 million cubics per annum. And that demand is unfortunately inadequate to Rand Water's customers. As it stands now, Rand Water is over abstracting the 1,600 million cubic meters per annum. And mainly this is due to the fact that there is growing demand from the municipal spaces. And again, there are existing consumer, inefficiencies, and new developments are coming. And there are also increased, informal settlements that are coming up as well. This then means that the demand keeps on increasing. Over and above that, the DG has indicated that we've got a serious challenge on increasing non-revenue water and water losses, particularly in the municipal spaces. As it stands now, we are losing more than 40% of our water that we are distributing to our customers. This then, it increases, the challenge of water demand in Gauteng. Moreover, the high water use inefficiencies in the municipal sector, it does not assist in exacerbating the challenge of water demand. So it is then important that more emphasis be put specifically in the municipal space to try and reduce the non-revenue water as well as the water losses. And more emphasis is needed, to be placed in consumer behavior. We need to embark on more awareness campaign in an attempt to reduce the water demand in Gauteng, because we can do as much as we can, but if the consumer behavior is not changing, that is not going to assist the situation. So now, as it stands, in light of the fact that the challenge of non-revenue water and water losses, it is increasing year in, year out, Rand Water is attempting to partner with municipalities in implementing water conservation and water demand management projects that would assist in reducing the losses as well as the non-revenue water to ensure that the sustainability of water supply in Gauteng is secured. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Salome. And I think just to note the consistent message about the challenge, particularly in the Gauteng situation, with the extraction limit, with the high level of water losses, and again, the need for a comprehensive approach that includes both government at a municipal infrastructure point of view, but as well as consumers at in an industrial and at a domestic level. Moving on to Nandha Govender of Eskom. Good morning, Nandha. Thank you for joining us. It'll be great to get your view as a large water user on whether you have the same common understanding as what's been already articulated, and maybe just to give some guidance on your own view on what if we don't manage this appropriately, what are the water risks and what impact does it have on you as your business?
Yeah, thanks, Peter, and thanks for the invitation. And from Eskom side, I think, as we always say, is besides just being a major user of water, industrial user. I think it's the importance of having water for our electricity production and generation, and also the need for long-term, I think, planning. So when you build a power station, you have to look at the water supply. You have to look at a long-term view. And so the nature of our business is to make sure that water security is kind of at the center of that. And that talks to everything from the resource to the infrastructure. Yeah, so we are part of a system, the integrated Vaal system. We are not, although we are a strategic water user, we do have certain benefits, but in terms of curtailments or restrictions, we are the last to be curtailed because of the need of water for production or electricity generation. But I think, like I said, we're part of a system. We cannot act as if we are not impacted. Some of the risks that the DG has alluded to is having an impact in terms of water demand from the same resource where we are abstracting water from. So we all have to play our part, as the DG say, we all have a role to play. And we have to look at it from a risk management perspective. So everything that we can do, whether it's not only the municipalities, but all sectors, coming together and playing their part in terms of water use efficiency, reducing demand, and also playing their part in terms of active involvement in terms of managing risks. Yeah, I think that's the kind of setting in terms of where we are at. I think over the years, if you look at it, we always identified water security as a major risk to our business. And if you look at the evolution of Eskom, we've kind of, if you look at our water footprint, it has reduced significantly. The whole intent behind that was to become more water resilient, and also to make sure that water is not a major risk to our business. So everything from the choice of technologies to the introduction of dry cooling, to the water use efficiency targets that we set for our power stations, to the water management, to our practices around reuse, recycling, is all part of an effort to reduce our water demand and make sure that for every kilowatt hour of electricity we generate, the water component thereof is actually minimized. So that's been our recipe for success. But like I said, we're part of a system. We see the risks. So that also calls for us to be active in the management of just looking beyond just our own operations, being active in the space of working with our suppliers like the Department of Water and Sanitation and Rainwater to understand their challenges and work together with them to make sure that we have water flowing to the power stations. So things like asset management, maintenance, making sure that outages are happening, making sure the plant is available, etc., is part and parcel of our day-to-day jobs. But I think more importantly is to make sure that our business continuity plans are in place. So what could trip us up? Besides the demand supply gap, it could be any disasters like floods, etc. So what are those things that are going to come that's going to be impacting on us, and how do we manage that proactively? I think, and not getting to a crisis situation like we are at the moment. So I think we have to look long term, see what's coming at us. And I think the beauty of Eskom, we've been through this with the load shedding saga. So there's a lot of lessons to be shared with the rest of the other sectors in terms of what can be done in terms of best practice, and how we turn the tide around that. So yeah, so maybe the last point I think is water conservation, water demand management. I think that for me is a non-negotiable. Every sector, every business, every household should be driving this. And I think it should be a national program, to be honest, that we embed this not as a behavior change, but also in terms of how we run our business from a sustainability perspective. So Peter, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Nandha. I think some interesting things, and particularly Eskom's potential leadership role in learning from the energy crisis. I think this is, anyone you talk to will say, what have we learned? And I think the general view is there's a lot of similarities, but there's some very fundamental differences in the water sector versus what played out in the electricity sector. The most fundamental of it being you can't put up a solar panel and generate water. So, you know, people were able to protect themselves and de-risk in many ways and if they had the means on the energy side, but water is very different in that context. So it's very much a collective response that addresses what we are able to move in the system. But again, I think some great learnings that we can take from that, from incentives to businesses to improve energy efficiency to some of the projects in private sector investment. So there's a lot that we can take from that, and perhaps that's a discussion in its own right. But again, I think the key takeaway comes back to the same point that both the DG and Rand Water have shared with us, and that's the situation that we are in now. It is absolutely critical that we drive water conservation and water demand management, both through the distribution infrastructure, but as well as at a consumer level. Dr. Phillips, just coming back to you. I mean, have you got a view? You know, we've discussed the fact, you know, that we have this issue of offset maintenance, lack of investment, now requires fairly hefty investment to start to improve that situation. Do you have a view of what the investment requirements are, or the financial requirements are, and where they may come from and where the gaps may be? Or do you mainly just look at the bulk distribution infrastructure, and that's purely the purview of the municipalities?
Yeah, I'm just obviously answering that same question in the chat, but the water value chain has various elements to it. In a nutshell, DWS provides raw water from schemes such as Lesotho Highlands. We sell that raw water to various customers, including Eskom, but also to the water boards like Rand Water. Rand Water treats the water and then sells it to municipalities who distribute it. We are raising the money for Lesotho Highlands Phase 2, which is in the order of 40 billion rand, completely in the markets through our entity called the TCTA. So it's all private sector financing for Lesotho Highlands Phase 2. Rand Water has a planned capital works program of approximately 30 billion rand in order for it to have the additional treatment and storage capacity required so that it can treat a lot more water once Lesotho Highlands Phase 2 comes online. Rand Water also borrows all its money for its capital requirements on the market. So again, it's private sector finance. So if you add our 40 billion plus Rand Water's 30 billion, that's 70 billion rand, which is currently underway and due to be completed by 2028 to enable more water to be supplied to Gauteng, which is very substantial, and none of that has to come from the fiscus. It's all money borrowed from the private sector, largely from the banks and from the pension funds. Now, of course, those loans need to be financed and they need to be paid off. And the money for financing and paying off those loans has to come from people paying their water bills and companies paying their water bills. So we sell water to Rand Water, who must pay us, and we use that money to pay off our loans. Rand Water sells water to the municipalities, and it uses that money to pay off its loans. So the municipalities must pay Rand Water for the water provided to them. And in order to do that, the municipalities must have very efficient and effective revenue collection systems, and they must reduce their non-revenue water. Municipalities aren't going to be able to pay Rand Water if they're throwing away 30 or 40% of the water that they buy from Rand Water through leaks, or if their billing and revenue collection systems are inefficient, so they're not collecting as much as possible of the revenue that should be collected from their distribution of that water. And that emphasizes, Peter, what you said at the beginning of this webinar, of the importance of reducing non-revenue water at municipal level. The whole system depends on us successfully reducing non-revenue water at municipal level, because the financial sustainability right through the value chain is currently being threatened by the increasing non-revenue water at municipal level.
Thank you very much, DG. I think it gives a good picture of where ultimately the money comes from. Salome, from a Rand Water perspective, I mean, do you have a view? You talk a lot about Project 1600. I know that you have a vision to support the municipalities in your supply areas. Do you have visibility of what the gaps may be in terms of funding required to close municipal non-revenue water?
Yes, we do. What Rand Water is currently doing is to put 1% in tariff, to increase the tariff with 1%. And that 1% would then be used to implement water conservation and water demand management projects in the Rand Water area of supply. So that is one project that is anticipated to begin in the next financial year. So in terms of Project 1600, it is mainly aimed at ensuring that communications with all relevant stakeholders okay in terms of water demand and water, losses issues with the various stakeholders and customers of Rand Water. The aim is to ensure that municipalities, they are using their water sparingly so that we can curb, the non-revenue water and water losses as it is very high now. Over and above that, there are a lot of, interventions that Rand Water is doing from a technical perspective. It has its own infrastructure development plan, wherein it has a lot of projects that are aimed at, ensuring that, the non-revenue water as well as the losses, are curtailed to meet the increasing water demand in Gauteng.
Thank you, Salome. I'm just looking for the exact question, but you started to bring it in. I know there was a question around tariffs and the likelihood of increase in tariffs. The tariff that you're referring to is the tariff that you charge the municipalities versus I guess some of your bulk users. Do you have a view on whether that's going to be pushed onto the consumers and whether the municipalities would be looking to increase tariffs, or that's an unfair question for you and we should do that in a subsequent discussion with the municipalities? I'm not personally aware of how the pricing strategies work, so I don't know if yourself or Dr. Phillips would be able to comment on that.
Yes, from Rand Water perspective, we are charging the municipalities, and then the municipalities will obviously charge that to the consumers. So that is one project that has not yet started, though. It is going to start in the next financial year.
Thank you. And Dr. Phillips, anything you would want to venture on the tariff side? I mean, were you expecting any changes to tariffs? That's premature just to discuss it at this point.
Well, the Sanitation phase 2 is going to have an impact on tariffs in the municipalities. You heard the figures that I gave, that borrowing has to be funded. And again, it brings us back to the issue that we're living in a water scarce country, Peter. Lesotho Highlands phase 2 is a very, very expensive project. South Africa has limited limited remaining opportunities for capturing surface water. There aren't limitless opportunities for capturing surface water. And the remaining opportunities are becoming increasingly expensive. Naturally, over the last 100 years or so, or 150 years, the engineers chose the most cost-effective and cheaper options for building dams initially. And all those options have now been utilized. And any additional national water infrastructure that is constructed is necessarily focused on the remaining opportunities, which tend to be the more expensive ones. So because water is scarce in South Africa, continuing to provide increasing amounts of water is going to become increasingly expensive. And that in itself has to be a driver of us using water more sparingly.
Thank you, DG. And again, I think, the intention of these sessions is to provide clarity on these. So to the extent that we aren't able to fully thrash out a particular topic, please do feel free to reach out to us, and we can perhaps have a future session on very specific topics so we can dig into them a little bit deeper. Nandha, just coming back to yourself, it keeps coming back to water conservation, water demand management. Maybe just a view from your experience at Eskom and then as well as within the water partners. How best and what are the best levers to promote better water stewardship at a corporate level and at a domestic level? Perhaps you can provide some guidance on that for us, please.
Yeah, I think, you mentioned stewardship. So I think stewardship talks about bringing in experts, specialists from all sectors working together. The problem is a bit more complex. Sometimes it's not just a technical problem. Sometimes there's a bit more to it. So I think the collective wisdom of bringing people together is very important. So I think that's where the stewardship concept comes from. And then I think also looking at lessons learned. So within Eskom, I think we've been a long partner with the Department of Water and Sanitation. I remember way back we had a water conservation, water demand management program, MOU signed, and we're kind of reinitiating that given what's happening in the integrated Valdover system. And it's all about committing to certain targets, committing to implement best practices within your sites, and also promoting the importance of water and the awareness around it. So I think it all goes together. If everyone plays their part, I think then you'll find that we may have some leeway in terms of that supply demand gap. So hence the reason why also in support of what the DG is saying, we all have a role to play. And I think if you look at load shedding, Eskom did make a plea to customers, consumers to reduce demand, to avoid load shedding, various stages thereof. And at some point, I think with the support of the customers and consumers, you start to see that you start to turn the tide like we are at the moment. We're 80+ days without load shedding, so that's good news. It has benefits all around, especially from a water security supply perspective. It just alleviates the pressure. Yeah. So I think specific interventions, commitments, maybe MOUs, putting money where your mouth is. I know with the SWPN, bringing in the private sector, bringing your change champions, leaders to all come on board, similar to what we did on the energy side, is to drive this as a collective. So everyone should be speaking from the same hymn sheet, not just the minister, or not just the DG, everybody. Thanks.
Thank you, Nandha. And again, just to reiterate that the Water Partners Network is established to work with the department and our municipalities and our water utilities to leverage our relationships with business and civil society to do what we can to support this. Dr. Phillips, maybe as an independent, I can just share with everybody that our experience in this Gauteng water crisis discussion so far is that there is certainly alignment from all the government sector stakeholders as well as business and civil society players. And you mentioned earlier that the World Bank has been facilitating a process to align with everyone. And I guess just from an independent point of view, I'd just like to acknowledge that work has been going on. As recent as yesterday, having discussions around the leadership group and the structures and what needs to be done. So really just to acknowledge that is a place. We are all still trying to figure out exactly what roles and what functions belong to who and how we can best support. But I think it'll become more clear in the short term And again, just to reiterate that there is an acknowledgement by all parties, be it the department, be it Rand Water, be it the municipalities that they feed, that there is an issue that needs to be dealt with, and it's going to take the sum of the parts to resolve it. I don't know, Dr. Phillips, is there anything specific you wanted to share on that structure at this point in time, and its sort of key focus areas in the short term?
Our key focus areas in the short term is the most important one is to implement a communications and awareness campaign in Gauteng of a similar scale to that which was implemented in Cape Town. I'm sure quite a few of the participants in the webinar would have visited Cape Town during the time when Cape Town was approaching day zero, and will be aware that immediately when you entered Cape Town, the messages about the need to use water sparingly, and the messages about the need for everyone to play a part hit you in the face immediately. It was everywhere, and it was very, very successful, and that every individual household and every business had to play. So an individual household can save some water, and that water saved by an individual household doesn't make a lot of difference in the bigger scheme of things. But if most households in Cape Town displayed the same behavior, then it did make a huge difference. And they also did clever things, like they made publicly available information about which, even down to a household level, about the extent of water usage in individual households, so that they introduced a degree of peer group pressure so that people could see in their communities which are the households which are using high amounts of water, and therefore taking the whole of Cape Town closer to a situation of day zero. It was extremely effective. Even to this day, Cape Town still has the lowest average consumption of water per capita per day of all the cities in South Africa, because that water conservation and demand management program, that awareness campaign in Gauteng, had a sustained impact on water usage in Cape Town. So our immediate priority is to work with the private sector in Gauteng and organize business nationally with prominent civil society people and with sector experts to try and develop these messages, to implement an awareness campaign on the scale that Cape Town did, so that visitors to Gauteng obtain a similar experience of an in-your-face communications campaign about the new Cape Town. And the first part of it is to reach consensus as to what are the key issues. It's not, at the moment, there's a very low level of trust in anything government has to say. And we need to address that trust deficit, so that when we ask people to use water more sparingly, we don't get a response that, oh, now you're blaming the residents for your own poor maintenance of the water infrastructure and your own inability to deliver water. So we need to build up trust that government is trying to improve what it's doing, what it has to do on its side, but that residents also need to play a part. Thank you, Peter. That's our immediate, most important objective.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips. And again, just to reiterate from participating, I think what drives a lot of this is it's not saying that infrastructure doesn't need to be repaired. It's just a phasing approach. And, you can make immediate impacts in behavior, whilst in the more medium term, you raise finance to sort out some of the more critical issues. So again, a core tenet of all of that, and I know a lot of our partners in discussions point to the importance of reliable, factual data, transparency around that data, so that everybody has a clear view of what the situation is. So again, just to reiterate that's been acknowledged by all stakeholders as an important piece. But then importantly, the communication of that and what it means and what it means to all of us and what we can do at a business level and a personal level is important. So this is really just a first start of all of that. Maybe again, just to point that the Strategic Water Partners Network are represented in that structure. So if there are any partners that want to do more in supporting the water situation, please do get hold of myself or Michelle, Michelle Proud. Michelle, maybe you can just put your contacts in the chat. Do feel free to get hold of us. We're happy to guide. We have a very specific approach from the Strategic Water Partners Network from a convening point of view to try and aggregate interest and intent into projects that can make a difference. So what we're seeing a lot from businesses at this point in time is interest in managing operational business risk by doing water demand projects in their direct zones that have an impact on water storage, and obviously has an impact on their own operational water supply. We have seen interest from companies that have global ESG reporting requirements to be water neutral in their operations. So again, there are projects that we can pick up and structure for partners to effectively implement water demand reduction and water security projects. And then also a lot of the projects are in communities. So there is a strong community project level, local plumbing, local household plumbing type projects. And again, there's strong interest to link that to potential CSI opportunities from businesses. So there's a lot of different opportunities and different means to participate. I'm happy to give guidance to any companies that may want to dig a little bit deeper into this. We have a raft of questions and comments in the chat. Faiza, Michelle, I don't know if you can help me a little bit just to guide me how you want to do this. I can see there's probably about 10 or 20 questions, some in the chat, some in the Q&A, and some seem to be repeated. I don't know if you can just help me a little bit on how best to manage this.
Peter, I think since there's so many questions, let's leave the panelists to respond to the ones that they haven't been able to type. I know the DG has typed quite a few answers in there. Perhaps Nandha or Salome can respond to some of the other more general questions.
Can you help with those? Sorry, I'm not seeing the answers that have been typed. So perhaps you can
do that. Okay, from Darby, there's how large is the supply or demand gap, especially in high demand times? Or seen from another angle, how much should projected demand be reduced to sufficiently address the impending risk? Or we had stated we can attribute numbers to this.
Okay, I'll just answer that.
Go for it. Sorry, DJ, did I miss you there? You
in the chat box. I'll read out
okay,
what I wrote.
Okay.
Actually, the demand fluctuates daily and seasonally and is influenced by factors such as heat waves. Our estimate is that if we can reduce demand by about 8%, then we should be able to minimize the risk of supply disruptions caused by demand exceeding supply.
Thank you. Faiza, next one.
Given that loans need to be repaid, is there any motivation from a DWS or municipal perspective for large industrial water users to effect their own water recovery, as the municipalities would lose part of the revenue? Or two, if there is, are any constructive incentives for industry being planned for water recovery projects other than price increases?
I'm not sure, Salome, but Sean, yeah, go for it. Sean, if you're going.
We don't have any specific incentives for large water users to get their own supply, but on the other hand, there also aren't any major hurdles to them doing so currently, which is different to the electricity sector. You will recall that there used to be some regulatory hurdles preventing the private sector from generating its own electricity, which have been removed. So we're not in that situation in the water sector, which we have such regulatory hurdles. We do have a requirement, which is in the National Water Act, that any water user which draws raw water and uses it needs to get a water use license. And I think that that needs to remain, because we need to take care of our scarce water resources and make sure that they're used in a sustainable way. But we are have been implementing and continue to implement measures to make sure that those water use license application processes are implemented efficiently, and that they don't cause an undue delay to water users doing that. I think for some of the major water users, like Eskom, for example, or Sasol, which buy water from us directly, it will be difficult for them to meet their huge water needs through developing their own supply. At the moment in Gauteng, the key problem is that there's a shortage of treated water, so that one of the key things is for us to encourage users of that treated water both to use water more efficiently, but also to develop their own supply. And part of the awareness campaign, and many of the municipalities are already doing this, it would be to encourage residents, for example, to install rainwater harvesting facilities at their residences, which would reduce the demand for treated water.
Thank you. I've got another question from Andrew Barker for Salome. Please explain Rand Water's Project 1600.
Okay, Rand Water's Project 1600. The word 1600, it is the allocation that we have received from the Department of Water and Sanitation. So hence the name Project 1600. So we are entitled to abstract 1600 million cubic meters per annum. So of that 1600, Rand Water has then further set targets to its various consumers, you know, which are mainly municipalities. So then we have quarterly meetings in Project 1600 Forum, wherein we are determining and discussing whether the municipalities are using water
Sorry, Salome, I think you're breaking up a bit.
The element of water and sanitation, which is 1600, and then is Rand Water. Okay, apologies for that. Try to use that. Am I better now?
Yeah, carry
on.
Thank you.
All right. So we received the 1600 from the Department of Water and Sanitation, and then that 1600 is then broken down to all of our customers. So when then we keep track, you know, with our customers.
Oh. Faz, I'm not sure it's broken up on my side. Is it clear?
Yes, I cannot hear. So let me move to the next question for now.
Sorry, Salome, we'll come back to you.
Salome's got some issues. Faith has asked or stated and then asked, billing and revenue collection remains a big issue for many municipalities. Is there work and support underway to support municipalities with existing challenges?
And then we also have Project 60, you know, they had been apportioned to them. That is basically.
Sorry, Salome, we did lose you for a bit there, but I think it's clear about Project 1600. It's the allocation that you receive versus what you're supplying, and it's the initiative to support the demand reduction to reach and be within that target. Fazit, maybe you want to just repeat that question unless somebody picked it up already.
Is there work and support underway to support municipalities with existing challenges around billing and revenue collection?
Salome, I don't know if you want to comment and perhaps the DG.
Okay. On the billing and revenue collection, as part and parcel of, you know, assisting municipality The plan is to ensure that, all the municipalities, they've got, billing strategies in place to assist in enhancing such. And Rand Water now has set up an entity which is called Rand Water Services, which is plan is to ensure that, municipal operate, optimally, because when municipalities are failing, that then means that they won't be able, to pay us as Rand Water, and that creates, a serious challenge. So yes, there is a plan of ensuring that, billing strategies are in place as part and parcel of.
Thank you. Thank you, Salome. Sean, I know you wanted to comment?
The water conservation and water demand.
Thanks, Peter. Yes, National Treasury in particular provides intensive support to municipalities and the metros in particular to improve their billing and revenue collection. We have put in place a water partnerships office in partnership with the DBSA to assist municipalities to put in place partnerships with the private sector to reduce non-revenue water, and an element of that could also include getting the private sector to assist the municipalities to improve their billing and revenue collection systems. We're encouraging municipalities to make use of this offer and to put in place such partnerships with the private sector. It's an anomaly that municipalities can say that they don't have enough money to fix, for example, large water pipelines that are leaking. If they did fix those water pipelines and reduce the leaks, then they would get more revenue. It's important to mobilize private sector finance so that that financing gap can be addressed, and that private sector finance can be used to do things like fix the large broken pipes which are leaking, and that finance can be paid off through increased revenue from the reduced leaks, or through reduced expenditure on buying water from Rand Water, which is then lost through leaks. So that's a major focus for us, to resolve that financing problem to reduce non-revenue water.
Thank you. And just to add on to that, just to note that the Strategic Water Partners Network also plays a fringe role in this space. We supported Polokwane municipality on non-revenue water reduction, both from physical projects to reduce, to come up with a non-revenue water strategy, then to execute some of the projects to reduce water demand, but then also importantly to do the work required to understand how to raise the full value of non-revenue water finance required. And to Sean's point, that has now been handed over to the Water Partnerships Office to structure something around performance-based contracting that will start to make a major impact there. But our aspirations from the Water Partners Network is to leverage our partners. We already have had contributions from SAB and Anglo American into very specific municipal water partnerships, which are effectively non-revenue water funds, and we're looking to scale that in the event that we can match our work with the interests of business. We also know that business isn't there to continually pay for fixing these issues, but there are certainly areas in which there's alignment of interest where these projects can be catalytic to the longer term play around the Water Partnerships Office. So again, happy to share with people anything that they would like to hear on that front. Faiza, can I take your guide? Maybe just 2 more questions, and then what we can undertake to do is to get a full list of the questions and perhaps publish it afterwards for those that wanted that we didn't manage to get to.
Yes, only about 1 or 2 left. Dr. Phillips, what about underground water? Is there any plans on using underground water to increase water supply? Nina was asked.
Groundwater is largely a local issue, in that for residents to put in boreholes to use a relatively small amount of groundwater doesn't require a water use license from the department. So currently, it's quite an unregulated environment for residents to put in place their own boreholes. It is something which we encourage, but it needs to be monitored to make sure that groundwater is used sustainably and there isn't over abstraction. But we are encouraging municipalities to encourage residents, or at least not to discourage residents from contributing to addressing this problem by getting additional source of water, such as implementing boreholes and such as rainwater harvesting. There are also some municipalities in Gauteng which may be able to have larger groundwater schemes, and we encourage them to plan for that and to assess whether that's viable, and whether they have sufficient resources of groundwater to do that. The larger groundwater schemes would require a water use license from that, but as long as the conditions are such that the groundwater levels would be sustained, we would normally approve such license applications. So yes, increasing use of groundwater in a sustainable way is part of the solution.
Thank you.
And finally, for Nandha, what is Eskom's view on the impact of electricity supply or load shedding and unplanned power outages on water security at the municipal level?
Yeah, I think it goes without saying. I think load shedding has had an impact in terms of pumping, treatment, distribution of water supply, and I think this comes back to the planning and risk management. Not only because I think everybody has been taken off guard, especially at the municipal water board level. So I think apart from alternative power supplies, that should be part and parcel of your business planning now. I think the alternative is in terms of making sure you have security of power supply. But I think your networks redundancy in terms of power supply as well. Yeah, but I think you need to plan for outages. I think between rainwater and the water boards and the municipality, they need to cater for maintenance. The maintenance needs to happen, like the DG was saying, maintenance is key. Plus you got a demand placed on it. So it's a similar scenario as Eskom, where we had a problem of not, doing our maintenance. So we have to create space for maintenance. And that's just, where we had to increase some of the levels of load shedding. But if you reduce the demand, it then reduces the stages of load shedding. Similarly, I think from a water supply perspective, the extent of restrictions or curtailments will reduce if capacity is created for maintenance. I think additional storage, it wasn't part and parcel of the local distribution networks. Now I think it is part and parcel of what's required. You have to cater for storage, like we have to cater for energy storage. Yeah, I don't see, the other thing about, I think the advantage for Eskom, we had the renewable energy independent power producer program, which has now brought in about 11,000 megawatts into the grid. And that's quite substantial over the past 2 years. I don't know if there's a similar kind of thing on the water side, where can you get water, but we all link to the same system, the DG mentioned about groundwater is a local issue, but there's not much you can, get out of it, but we all link to the same system. There's no water that you can create apart from going back to the integrated evolver system. I think maybe the alternative is reuse and waste. How do we use that and for what applications we utilize that and what can we then do in terms of other applications? Maybe we need to look at water quality being a way of how we allocate, different water qualities to different users. But our systems are all designed, the linear systems, they all go through the same pipeline. So it's very difficult to be able to manage different water qualities going through similar or the same pipelines. But yeah, that's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you, Nandha. And I think with that, we'll wrap. Perhaps just give everybody a last chance. Dr. Phillips, anything you want to say in closing?
I'd just like to thank everybody for participating. This is part of our process of trying to make government more transparent and accountable, and to try and build consensus and understanding of what are the problems and what's been done about them. and to try and address this trust deficit, which understandably exists. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you. Salome, Randwater, any last thoughts?
Last thoughts from my side, Peter, is that we all have to partake in terms of ensuring that there is security of water supply in Gauteng and in the country at large. It is not just the responsibility of water boards or municipalities or the Department of Water and Sanitation. We have indicated here that education and awareness, it's critical, meaning that it becomes the responsibility of each and every individual in South Africa to ensure that water is conserved in order to enable, sustainability of water supply in Gauteng and in South Africa at large. Thank you.
Thank you. And Nandha, from your side?
Yeah, maybe, we're in it. It's not going to be a short-term thing. Even if Lesotho Highlands Phase 2 comes on stream, we already know that the demand is going to exceed the supply already. So we need, similar to Eskom in the long term, when we started load shedding, it took a while now to turn the tide. Similarly with water supply here to not only to Gauteng, but other provinces. It's going to take us a while, but I think partnerships is key, leadership is key, collaboration is key. And I think we need to bring in the private sector from not only from a financing funding, but also from an innovation perspective. And like I said, I think water conservation, water demand management is something that we need to drive actively across all sectors. Thanks.
Thank you. So maybe just from my side, just thank you to the team in the back end that put it all together. And Michelle and Pfizer, thank you very much. And then for Martin, who also knows there's been on standby to step in if we had any issues. Thank you, Martin, for being available. And thank you all of you for your time. I think if I can just leave with one parting thought, as it's been mentioned by the department and by Randwater, they are very open to sharing this information. They've never turned down an opportunity to support us in these types of sessions to discuss with partners. If we can help them to broaden this message, it'll be very helpful. We've only had 150 people on this call today. We will publish the recording and try to summarize the report for you all and put on the website. We'll communicate that with you. But if you can help to be advocates as well in talking to your own communities, whether it be at your own business level, talking to your employees, to your stakeholder groups, that we can start to broaden this message. This is really just a starting point. We would hope in the future to get a lot more detailed on numbers, facts, interventions, etc. And again, if we've got a network of people that can help us to distribute the message, we'll be in a lot stronger position to be able to act together. Knowing full well, like we've said all along, there's acknowledgement at all levels that there's interventions to be done at a bulk level, at a distribution level, at a municipal level, but also at an industrial and a private level. So I think it's important that we start to put numbers against that, and so we can start to see our own impacts can have an impact on our own well-being and good standard of living and strong businesses. So if you can help us with that, I think it'll be really much appreciated that we can start becoming an advocacy and a leadership group in our own right with the information that we all have. Everybody's asking the questions around the dinner table. We hopefully will start to provide some of the facts around that you can all share to demystify what may be the situation at this point. So again, thank you very much, and thank you for always being available. And we will communicate what future sessions will be coming up. Thank you. All the best.